everybody, it's Professor Grady here, and we're going to talk a little bit about modeling for animation and what the difference is and why that pertains to your weapon design project. We are doing a hard surface model, so most of what we have to worry about for modeling for animation are pivot points. But I wanted to go ahead and dive a little bit deeper into the concept for future classes. So usually when you're modeling a prop and it's just a standalone prop that someone can pop into their game and environment, it's meant to stand in the background and just look pretty, you can get away with some things. For example, I could come over to this little crate here that maybe I want to bevel. There, a bevel. Oh gosh. We'll do this side. Throw a bevel. See why it's freaking out. This is so funny. Oh, it's because of my extrusion. I'll just scale it out a little bit for the example. No, something's definitely wrong. Well, that's embarrassing. Anyway, I could come over here and I can bevel this. Da, 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 da. Then I realize, oh, I want all my edges beveled. Let's bevel. Oh no, but what about this triangle? Oh no! What do we do? Well, if it's on a crate, and in a standalone prop in an environment, and it's on a flat surface, this little triangle isn't going to interfere with the shading. And that's acceptable. That's okay. We're not going to cry over that. And in fact, it is how we come up with more of optimize efficient models. Sometimes you have to do some weird triangulation. And that's one of the things that not weird, but appropriate triangulation. That's one of the things that we learned when we did the crate, right? He has all these very, very fancy bevels that are just on one side. And if I bevel, oh, I figured out what was wrong with my bevel on this. I had symmetry turned on. But I'll go back to this guy. If I bevel a single edge, that creates n-gons. I could easily wrap this all the way around. And honestly, for a simple model, that's what I would do. And just multi-cut to fix it. Make sure edit edge flow is turned off there. Got a little extra vert hanging out there that I'll fix real fast. Bam. And bada bing, bada boom, I have good typology. But let's say this bevel was much more significant. Then maybe I would want to consider triangles. Here's the thing though. When you're modeling for animation, this creates what we call bad deformation. It causes things to go to pinch. And I'll kind of explain that as I go. What we also know from doing our crate project is that triangles can be problematic for a high poly, especially if you want to use ZBrush. And if I was continuing to work on it, suddenly my edge loops no longer wrap all the way around. You will likely do a high poly for this model. It's not required, but honestly, I would recommend it, especially for your portfolio. So, and it's also for animation. So what are we going to do? What are we going to do that's different? One, we're going to keep things quads. We may be so clever in how we do things. We also want to think about what parts we want to be together and what parts we want to be separate. Maybe I had an additional like inlay or some rivets or something in this crate. When I was done with it, I would just select all my objects and combine them into one thing. And now they have one pivot point. In animation, we don't necessarily do that. I'll show you why. When it comes to hard edge modeling for animation, You want your parts that will be animatable to be separate so you can animate their pivot points. For example, in this gun, I have the trigger as a separate object. This gives it its own pivot point. So then I can rotate it and animate the trigger. You also have to think about the, the scale of your model for animation. For example, one of the things you have to do for this project is model a projectile. So you want to make sure that your projectile can fit believably in the gun barrel and things like that. Struggling today. If I did this in ortho views, this would have been a lot easier. So making sure that it can clear easily for animation, right? These are all things you'll have to consider with your weapon design. Pretty simple, right? Pivot point animation, you've done it before. Remember, if you hold down D, you can change the location of your pivot point. You can also hold down X to snap to grid, or hold down V to snap to vertices. V as in Victor or vertex. Now, I'm going to undo that. Not all of you are going to be making guns for your weapon, and in fact, I encourage you not to do that. Maybe you do a mace and chain. Well, then the thing that would be animated would be the chain or the rope. And that is done very differently. That's not just a pivot point animation. That requires an actual ball joint chain and rigging. You do not have to rig your assignment beyond putting the pivot points in the right place. But I still am going to explain this to you and show you how it works. Basically, if you have something like a ball joint chain or a rope, you're like a link, etc. A cord is another example. You would use this ball joint button, just like you did in your animation class, and create some joints. Just gonna, let's turn on view. Where's my X-ray? Might be under shading. X-ray joints, there we go. We'll just draw them again. Why can't I see my joints? Let's go to display. Animation. Joint size. There we go. There we go. Okay. And I'm going to click to set a joint, and then I can just click on. And we want it to be pretty fluid, so we'll do a couple. 5's probably too many already, but I'm just gonna add a couple more just for this example. And again, this is called a ball joint chain. You can find it under your rigging shelf, and it looks like a little ball joint doll. I'm only showing this to show you the concept. So you select your skeleton or your ball joint chain, your mesh. I'm going to go to rigging here and go to skin, bind skin. And see, now it deforms to the joints. But you'll notice that there are some sharp corners. When you have a rope like this, or a cord, ball joint chain, etc., you need plenty of geometry for it to properly deform. But you still need to make it efficient for a game. So you really have to be careful how you manage your poly count. Because if you have a ball joint chain, you're going to need significant edges in the actual chain or in the actual cord or rope for it to deform properly. Let's dig even deeper. We are not going to do character modeling in this class, but we do have character development if that's something that you're interested in. And this is another reason why we can use triangles but tend to avoid triangles, especially when we're still working on the details on our models. Optimization can be another step, especially if we're making a high poly. In in character modeling, you have to actually model for deformation. And you need to model so you don't get things called pinching. And triangles not only cause issues with shadings, but they also cause issues with pinching. You also have edge flow zones. So you can see that these edges loop around the mouth, right? I'm going to actually color that a different color so you can see what I'm talking about here. I just wanted to do a fawn because I could. Okay, there we go. So you can see that this loops around. And the reason that it does that is so I can add detail to just the mouth for better deformation. You can see that the edge loop goes nice and cleanly around the mouth, but it doesn't go anywhere else in the model. So it's only increasing my poly count around the mouth and not around the entire object, allowing for efficient modeling but acceptable deformation. You'll also notice that there's very few poles or stars. This is called a 5-star. And this modeler has actually put it on a part that is rigid, the cheekbone. So you want to make sure to avoid poles on areas that would deform. Again, we're doing hard edge modeling, so it's mostly pivot point. But I think this is really important to understand so when I come up to you, I'm like, you probably shouldn't have too many poles. That's part of the reason why. And another reason poles can be a problem is they can divert edge flow. You can see how this is a different type of edge flow, and then my insert edge loop works like this. My insert edge loop looks like this here, and it works like this here. So all that is because of that 5-star. It's desirable here, but definitely wouldn't be desirable if you're trying to add detail to your model. So you really have to be careful how you create your typology when you're considering animation. This is kind of what a lot of modeling is all about. Like you'll see tons of references, especially for character modeling, out there on just how to do edge flow for muscles for proper deformation. I'm going to go back to the face here just so you can see how cleanly this deforms. I'm going to put on the face here. Face controllers, please. Is it mad because I have the mesh? We'll just make everything visible. There they are. So this is an unusually complex mesh, and it has lots of great facial controllers, and you can see as I move them around, it deforms nice and cleanly. It doesn't pinch in weird areas. It deforms organically, and that's because it has good edge flow. It has those flow zones. So I wanted to show one more thing, just kind of getting back to considering the edge flow of, because edge flow and modeling for animation go hand in hand. This is a sword, a stylized sword. This is a game asset by an artist on ArtStation. And it is not modeled for animation. This would be a hard edge model, but it's still very like a hard surface model that would be swung. But I want you to show that it still uses the same concepts of edge flow, and it only puts these triangles in areas that are flat. But another issue with this triangle is if I wanted to insert an edge loop here, it would stop at this point. So that's something that I'm probably going to add after I've made my high poly, if I'm making a high poly, after I know I'm not going to add any additional detail. And I also want to point out there are two pieces to this model. This is a very efficient model. You can see that the handle is actually all one piece, and then the curved blade of the sword is one piece. This is very well optimized. That's pretty awesome. So that's my big spiel about modeling for animation. One, make sure and also a random tirade, it's not random, it's completely intentional, into typology, because typology, edge flow, and modeling for animation go hand in hand. So again, for our class, worry primarily about pivot points. Hold down D to change your pivot points. X also allows you to snap pivots to grid. V also allows you to snap to point. If you have a rope, you'll need to give it enough geometry for a ballpoint chain. And throughout your process, try to maintain good edge flow, even if it's not deforming, because that will help you create a very efficient model and be able to enable you to make edits at any time. Also enable you an easy low poly, high poly process. I hope you find this video helpful and you have a great day.